ever get that feeling.
Like you're living in the middle of some kind of spy thriller.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I felt going through this Counter Spy magazine article about COINTELPRO.
Right.
It's a real-life FBI program, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And they get this psychological warfare tactics.
But not against, foreign enemies,
Mm-hmm.
like you might think.
Against American citizens.
It's a chilling chapter of American history, and it brings up, like, a lot of questions, even today about government overreach and how fragile our civil liberties actually are.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole thing.
What exactly was COINTELPRO?
And who were they targeting with all this?
Officially, COINTELPRO stood for Counterintelligence Program, and it was active from like the mid-50s to 1971.
Yeah.
So we're talking, a good chunk of time there. And it's supposed to be about countering foreign intelligence threats, like during the Cold War and all that.
Right.
But in reality, they used it against all sorts of groups that the FBI considered, I guess, subversive.
Okay.
We're talking about the Communist Party, for sure, but also the Black Panther Party, New Left, anti-war activists.
So not just like Cold War paranoia then?
They were going after anyone they saw as a threat, even their own citizens.
Pretty much.
How did they operate? What were their tactics?
Well, this is where it gets really unsettling.
Okay.
The article, it gets into their methods, and they're designed to be really insidious, to work from the inside out.
Okay.
Disinformation was like a major tactic.
Oh.
Spreading rumors, lies, half-truths to get people to distrust each other within these groups, to turn on each other.
Divide and conquer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But they didn't stop there. They also used what they call black propaganda.
Black propaganda.
Basically, they would plant these damaging stories in the media.
Often totally made up to discredit people, make organizations look bad.
Wow.
Imagine, like, opening up the paper one day and your name is just dragged through the mud, your reputation's shot.
Yeah.
And it's all based on lies made up by your own government.
That's chilling. It's like a smear campaign, but like on steroids.
Exactly.
And it gets worse. The FBI, they didn't just work alone.
They used other government agencies to target people, too.
What do you mean?
Think, like, IRS audits. But based on, like, nothing. Trumped up charges.
Yeah.
Or they'd pressure the local police to arrest people or even, like, mess with school boards.
Wow. They really did have their fingers in everything.
It's true.
It's like something out of a dystopian novel or something.
Right.
But it gets even wilder. The article mentions that they were creating like fake organizations.
I know, it sounds crazy. Right?
That's true.
The FBI would set up these front organizations, completely made up, and they'd use them to infiltrate and cause chaos in real activist groups.
So they were basically creating their own enemies and then using that to justify going after them even harder.
But you say
it's like they were manipulating reality itself.
It's a pretty disturbing picture.
This whole, the government weaponizing information like this,
Yeah.
manipulating people, crushing dissent, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff.
So it's all kind of,
Abstract.
Right.
Can we make this a little more, I guess, real?
Sure.
Can we talk about some, like, specific examples
Absolutely.
of how COINTELPRO actually played out in the real world?
Okay, so, like...
I think it'll help to really grasp, like, the human cost of these tactics.
Yeah, no, for sure. One example that comes to mind, and it's in the article too, is the Black Panther Party.
Right.
They were like a main target of COINTELPRO.
And the article, it talks about how the FBI would deliberately try to create problems between them.
Problems?
Yeah, like stir up tensions between the Panthers and some of the other groups they didn't like.
Like who?
Like, there was this group, the U.S. organization.
And the FBI, they knew that this kind of tension, it could lead to, violence.
So they intentionally stoked the flames.
Pretty much.
Knowing that it could have these, like, deadly consequences.
Yeah. I mean,
That's a chilling thought.
It's really messed up.
And it gets even worse, right?
Worse.
The article, it talks about the death of Fred Hampton.
Oh, right.
He was like a leader of the Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
Really charismatic guy.
And
the article, it says that the FBI actually had an informant, right?
Okay.
And this informant, they gave him the floor plan.
The floor plan?
And Hampton's apartment.
Oh, wow.
And then they used that floor plan.
In a raid where Hampton was killed.
You're saying they were complicit in his death?
Yeah, pretty much. The article goes even further, actually. It says that Hampton was drugged beforehand.
Drugs?
Yeah, by an FBI informant, so he couldn't even defend himself.
So this wasn't just, like, about disrupting a movement or something.
This was about eliminating a leader, silencing him.
It was brilliant.
This is a truly horrific example of how far they were willing to go.
Yeah.
And the Black Panthers weren't the only target, right?
No, not even close.
What about, like, Martin Luther King Jr.?
Yeah, even MLK.
That's always been a chilling story for me.
So here you have this guy.
Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Right.
A leader in the civil rights movement.
And the FBI, they still considered him like a threat to national security.
It's mind-boggling.
To see, like, a man who preached nonviolence, to see him as dangerous,
Mm,
it says a lot about the FBI back then.
for sure.
And their tactics against King, they were relentless.
Okay.
We're talking wiretaps, trying to blackmail him with personal stuff.
The article even says they suggested he commit suicide.
Suggested suicide.
That's just cruel, you know?
It goes beyond silencing him. It's like psychological torture.
They wanted to break him.
Discredit him, make sure his message of, equality and justice, that it wouldn't be heard.
And this wasn't just King, right?
No.
They did this to a lot of people.
All kinds of groups, actually.
Like who?
Well, the article mentions the Socialist Workers' Party.
Okay.
And, I mean, they would use COINTELPRO to get people fired from their jobs, harass them.
Just make their lives impossible.
Yeah, basically. It's horrifying to think about the effect this must have had on,
Yeah.
like, free speech
Oh, absolutely.
and activism.
Totally.
Imagine being afraid to speak your mind because the government might destroy your life.
Right. It's scary to think about.
That's not a world I want to live in.
But that's the thing about COINTELPRO. It wasn't just about, like, open suppression.
It was about creating this atmosphere.
Where people were afraid to even think about dissent,
So it wasn't enough to just silence people.
They had to make sure no one even considered speaking out in the first place.
Exactly.
So we have this program, COINTELPRO, right?
Right.
Officially, it ran from, like, what, the 50s to 1971.
Hmm.
But what happened after that?
Did the FBI just pack up and go home? Like, well, that was fun. Time for a new project.
That's the thing, right?
Officially, they say they abandoned the program.
Okay.
But this article, this Counter Spy magazine article, it kind of paints a different picture.
Different how?
Well, it suggests that maybe it didn't really end,
What do you mean?
Like maybe it just kind of
I
evolved.
worked into something else.
Different how? Like, give me something specific here. How is it different?
Well, the article, it talks about these intensive investigations.
Intensive investigations. That doesn't sound too promising.
Right. And it makes you wonder, like, are these tactics still going on? Just, under a different name, maybe.
You mentioned earlier
Yeah.
about how some of the FBI's post 9/11 tactics
Right.
seem kind of similar to, like, their Cold War strategies. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, for sure.
What specific parallels are we talking about?
Well, I think it comes down to, like, justification,
Okay.
Like, during the Cold War, the big threat was communism.
Right.
And they used that, basically, to justify all sorts of crazy stuff.
Like spying on people, silencing critics.
Exactly. And it's like they just swapped out communism for terrorism after 9/11.
Wow. It's like history repeating itself, isn't it?
Totally.
So, like, after digging into all of this about COINTELPRO, it's easy to think of it as, a thing of the past, like something out of a history book. But
right.
the thing is, right?
The tactics, the justifications, the potential for, like, abuse, it's all still relevant today.
It's scary how relevant it is.
So where does that leave us?
That's the big question.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's easy to get overwhelmed by all this,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's hopeless.
Okay, so, like, what can we do?
Well, for me, I think the biggest takeaway from all of this deep dive we just did on COINTELPRO,
Yeah.
is that we have to be,
Vigilant.
vigilant.
Yeah, we can't just be, like, passive consumers of information,
Okay, so, like, be more critical.
Exactly.
Don't just believe everything you hear.
Right, and don't be afraid to ask questions, like, why are things being done this way? Who benefits?
Question everything.
Basically, yeah.
Because if we don't learn from
We're
history...
doomed to repeat it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And learning from history, it means understanding how things like COINTELPRO happened.
Right.
So we can recognize those signs,
Yeah.
and stop it from happening again.
So, like, knowledge is power, basically.
100%.
The more we know about these tactics,
Right.
the less likely they are to work.
And the article, it doesn't just, talk about the tactics.
Okay.
It also makes this point, like, it could happen to anyone.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Well, they talk about how the FBI targeted the American Indian movement too, right?
Oh, okay.
And then it ends with this, like, really chilling question.
What's that?
Who's next?
Wow. That really makes you think.
It's like anyone could be a target.
If they're seen as a threat, yeah.
Yeah, if someone in power decides they're a threat.
Exactly.
This whole thing has really been,
eye-opening, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that, we can't take our freedom for granted.
Oh, absolutely.
We have to be willing to, stand up and fight for it.
All the time, yeah. Every single day.
Well, on that note, I think that's our deep dive into COINTELPRO for today.
A look into a pretty dark chapter in American history.
Sure.
And a reminder that we all need to stay, vigilant, think critically, and maybe have a healthy dose of skepticism.
Always.
No matter what's going on in the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself.